are people that really love this. But it can be also a very, very beneficial committee to have. People that are willing to get in there and take a look at things and go, you know what, we need to invest over here. You know, in order to improve the party, we need to invest on the tech side of things. Or we need to invest in engagement, you know, and making sure that, that we've got push cards to reach out to our Hispanic population or our African American population, Asian American population. You know, you're going to know what's going to work for your county, and you're going to have different focuses in different areas. But these are things that you guys can look at. Your budget committee can also work hand in hand with a finance committee or fundraising committee if you have that, or you might combine all of those into one. They might be in charge of fundraising, budget planning, and the like. So your finance committee, responsible for making sure that you have the finances there. And again, you can call it whatever you want. You might combine committees together, or you might keep them separate and give them each their own specific task to take care of. A volunteer committee. If you've got enough volunteers and if you've got enough people to create yourself a volunteer committee, sometimes you can find this to be really, really beneficial. Why would you find this to be beneficial? Well, because they can get out there and help you find more volunteers. Or they can make sure that your volunteers that you do have activities that they can go do. Again, view these committees as extensions of the county chair to make sure and take some workload off of them. Headquarters committee can also be developed to make sure you have a headquarters, maintain the headquarters, fund the headquarters, staff the headquarters. Those are all ideas that you can go through. Your vacancy committee, some counties have a vacancy committee to look at where you have precinct chair vacancies and find people to fill those. I would caution you on that. These can be really great or sometimes kind of off. I've seen the spectrum. Sometimes those committees wind up saying, you know, keeping people out, you know, and leaving a precinct vacant, even though you have somebody that's interested. They can serve a really great purpose. Just make sure that they're going along with the principles of the party and that they're helping to grow your party. So be careful about who winds up on your vacancy committee. And just make sure that it's serving the purposes of the party and helping you grow the party and keep the party on track with our principles. Candidate committee can be very useful in helping your candidates. They can help you recruit candidates. They can help you train your candidates and give them financial tools and campaign tools as well. Officers. Officers is pretty much like we talked about with committees. Some of these are going to be ones that you're really going to work through and it'll be very beneficial to you. Some of them not so much. So find out what works for your county. These again are just ideas. Customize it to your county. The county chair obviously is the officer that you're going to have, period. County chair is the leader of the party. They have duties prescribed within the statute. And then we talk about all the different things that the county chair can do and should be doing to help grow the party, make sure the elections are occurring, that we protect the integrity of those elections, and move the party forward towards our goals and our principles. County vice chair or vice chairs. In Tarrant County, when I was there, I was the vice chair there in Tarrant County. We only had one at that time, and we had other area leaders and committee chairs, etc. that worked for us at that time. Other counties had multiple vice chairs. Sometimes you'd have a vice chair in charge of a specific focus, such as finance, a vice chair of finance, or vice chair of volunteers, a vice chair of fundraising, that type of stuff. Other times they would call those committee chairs. Sometimes we'd have vice chairs that are broken up into geographical regions. So you might have a northern vice chair and a southern vice chair. Find out what works for your county, and it may change from time to time. There's nothing in here that says you have to do it just this way. These, again, are just ideas for you guys to use and to spark ideas for you to get creative and figure out what works. CEC officers, the duties of vice chairs, as I said, can be many. Figure out what works in your area and apply that. Treasurer. The treasurer is something that can be very beneficial for you. It's a very, very vital component when you start talking about financial filings. If you have to file with the Texas Ethics Commission, Federal Ethics Commission, or Federal Elections Commission, taking that off your plate as county chair, if you're like me, Not that I've ever been a county chair. Not that I really want to be a county chair. I actually really enjoy being where I'm at and supporting you guys and helping you guys as much as possible. But let's just say, if I ever became a county chair, I can do financial stuff, all right, but I'm not an expert. I can find somebody who really loves that stuff and really knows that stuff and is very detail-oriented. If that's not your strong suit, find yourself a good treasurer. That will save you a world of hurt, and it could save you some embarrassment in the media if you were to get fined, and also save you some money by not getting fined. So a treasurer can be, might be one of your favorite officers that you get. The secretary, as I talked about earlier, the secretary is the one officer that I would make sure you absolutely have. If you have nobody but the county chair and the secretary and some precinct chairs, that's what I'd recommend. If you're only going to have one other officer, make sure it's the secretary. They'll take your minutes for you, give you the reports at the meeting of what happened previously. But most importantly, they are the one officer that does have a statutorily defined duty, and that is if the county chair seat is vacant, they call the meeting to fill that vacancy. Other possible CEC officers, and again, I'm pulling something from Tarrant County where I'm at, where I come from. We had what we call area leaders. We broke those up in different ways across the time that I was there. We always broke it up geographically speaking. For a couple of years, we tried tying them to our JP districts and seeing how that worked. We went back to tying them to our House districts. The benefit there was that the area leaders, and in our case, the area leaders acted as a liaison between the county chair and the precinct chairs. Not that the precinct chairs couldn't talk to the county chair. Her door was always open and she was available. But it was a person that could help the county chair know those precinct chairs better, because there was one of her and there were 11 of them. So we were able to break that up and make sure that that everybody in each House district had one person they could go to or hear from. They kept them up to date in the loop and worked with them closely. So that's an idea that you guys could consider. You could do it by your county commissioner districts, JP, House rep, state senator, whatever works for you. All right, how about your county executive committee meetings? We alluded to this earlier, your organizational meeting. Your organizational meeting is the one meeting in the election code that is required of you. I would encourage you to have more than just one meeting every 2 years, but this is the one that is definitely required of you. This meeting must occur within 45 days of the term of office beginning. At this meeting, you establish your bylaws, and you can elect officers, etc. Fill vacancies. The two things that are recommended in RPT rule, because this is required both in state statute and other offices you may have, and the adoption of your local party rules or bylaws. That's what's required of you at your organizational meeting. Again, you don't have to limit yourselves to that. All right, with our CEC meetings, ideas for regular meetings. Make sure you're conducting business at your meetings, filling your precinct chair vacancies. If you have officers, they can give you reports on what activities they've been working on and what activities other people have been working on with them. Committee reports, if you have them. If you have committees, have your committee chairs come and give a report. Your vacancy committee can say, hey, these are who we're recommending to fill precinct chair vacancies. Your finance committee can tell you, hey, these are what we're thinking about doing for events to raise funds. So these are items that you would get reported on at your CEC meetings. Also, don't forget announcements of local Republican clubs and other activities, block walks, get out the vote efforts, voter ID, that type of stuff. You can have speakers. You could ask the state chair to come. I know he's been quite a few places around the state. He's probably visited a number of your CEC meetings across the state. So that's one person you can pick on. We also have our RNC National Committee man, Dr. Robin Armstrong, and our National Committee woman, Tony Ann DeShill. You could ask them. They also travel around the state and speak to clubs, to county executive committees, and all over the place. And they're more than happy to reach out to you guys and help. Your SREC members, Mr. McCloskey back here. Let's see. I know we've got several of our SREC members here in the room. I saw Debbie Terry here earlier, Mr. Dalton, Ms. Stanko over there. We've got a number of you guys here. Your SREC members, again, you've got a man and a woman, Ms. Robertson. sometimes we misled, and Sue Evenwell, who serves both as a county chair and an SRAC member. So these people are available to come and help you. And I will tell you, I really value the SRAC members with the job that I'm doing right now. Some of you guys have been extremely helpful to me in knowing your districts and in helping me in your districts. When I can't get a hold of a county chair in some of the smaller counties or whatever it is, maybe they're out for work. You know, some of the folks that work in the oil field or other areas that are on extended work periods. Sometimes you guys know what's going on in their lives, you know, and that helps clue me in. Other people who can ask to come in, your local elected Republican officials, your county judge, district judge, county commissioners, etc., your constables. They can all give your CEC members kind of a picture of what's going on in your county and how they can be involved and how they can help, how they can make your community better. Well-informed issue-based speakers. You can pull in people, gun rights activists. You can pull in people that are pro-life activists, property rights activists. The list goes on and on and on. Find yourself some well-informed issue-based speakers. Most of them will be more than happy to come and speak to you for free because they're promoting their agenda. Also, you could have some social time before or after, coffee, cookies, donuts, potluck dinner, that type of stuff. Make it fun for people so they want to come. Make it a social time, not all business and not all speeches. Make it a little bit of fun time. Not only is it fun and everything, but they also build that network with each other, which builds your party up and makes it stronger, where you can achieve more of your goals when you have a strong network there. All right, statutory meetings we talked about, organization meeting, we already covered that. Ballot draw, that occurs during, right at the end of your primary filing period. You have your ballot draw that occurs there, usually in mid to late December, sometimes on Christmas Eve, which is really not fun. The primary canvass and the primary runoff canvass in April and June usually. One thing you will notice, there's a ballot draw in here for the primary. There is not a ballot draw in there for the runoff. Prior to this last primary, there would have been, but in 2017, the state legislature got rid of the ballot draw for the runoff. So you're no longer doing ballot draws for runoff. Your candidates that advance into the runoff are listed in the same order that they would have been listed on the primary ballot. So if your third place and your fifth place candidates in the primary won, then third place is first and fifth place is second. Your CEC should be helping you to oversee the primary. There's a variety of things that they can do. You'll find people that are really great at something, one particular aspect of it. If you're in a county like I was coming from, Tarrant County, we had 694 precincts when I was there as the vice chair. And during the primary, we had to pare that down to somewhere around 200 and some precincts, about 212, 225 precincts. So you're having to combine precincts together. Finding people that are really great at that, looking at those maps and figuring out those districts can be a great help to you. In a variety of other areas that they can help you with. There's also the primary committee, which is actually defined in the law. Primary committee consists of the county chair and 4 members of the CEC. Those 4 members are appointed by the county chair, but they're subject to ratification. Now your CEC can provide by resolution, they can pass a resolution to set the number of members higher or lower, or they can just decide to not even have a primary committee. In that case, it would default to the county chair unless your CEC passed a resolution that says we're not going to have a primary committee because the primary committee is actually going to be this person. Not the county chair, it's somebody else. So your CEC actually does set the primary committee there. They help you review and approve the format of the official ballot and help you with the primary overall. And I know we're kind of glazing over the primary because we just finished with the primary. And every 2 years before we start into the filing period, the Secretary of State's office will conduct a training directly focused on the primary. It's an all-day seminar on a Friday, and then the following day on Saturday, the RPT usually does their own training as well to kind of help take all the legal jargon and election code stuff and everything that the Secretary of State's office threw at you, and you're going, oh my gosh, what did I get myself into? We try to help break it down into bite-sized pieces We try to help you guys connect with other county chairs, like Ms. Hagler and Ms. Edenwell, who have experience and have been through this stuff before and can tell you, hey, when you encounter this, you know, this is something you might not normally think of, and here's what I did to solve it. So you can get some really great ideas off of that there. I keep bumping buttons when I don't need to, apparently. All right. Another thing that your county executive committee helps you oversee are conventions. They do have a role in your convention process. Your county executive committee sets the date, time, and location of your precinct conventions. So at one of your CEC meetings, that's what you guys do. You're going to need to address that issue. Now, you can't just set it anytime you want. It does have to occur sometime after the polls close on primary election day, but before your county convention or your Senate district convention convenes. So you have about a 2.5 to 3 week window for your precinct conventions to occur. They can occur the night of the primary election at your polling location or somewhere else. They can occur on the day of your county or Senate district convention where those conventions are being held just before they actually convene. Or at any point in between. And I've seen that used, I've seen all of those options being used across the spectrum. One exception to that is you get into really, really wacky year like we did in 2012, where we had all the redistricting lawsuits and everything, and it kept pushing the primary back and the convention cycle back till eventually the courts kind of set the law aside and said, you guys can go ahead and have your conventions. We had conventions before we had the primary elections, the precinct conventions. Each county got to decide if they were going to hold precinct conventions and how they were going to hold them. The other thing you guys can do, the county executive committee does, RPT Rule 23A.B is that they can set the ratio by which your delegate allocation from your precinct conventions to your county or SD convention. The default is one delegate for every 25 votes or major fraction thereof for governor in the most recent gubernatorial election in that precinct. Or you can change that up to 1 to every 40, or you can go anywhere in between that. So your county executive committee can set that. Refer to Rule 23AB and the RPT rules if you're interested in that, because there is a time frame that you have to make sure and have that occur in. All right, statutory requirements of the CEC. They set the time and location of your county or your Senate district convention. If you live in a county where you only have one Senate district in it, you have a county convention. If you live in a county where you have more than one Senate district in your county, state Senate district, then you have Senate district conventions. That's the way the laws are written. I believe there might be one caveat to that, that you can hold your Senate district conventions in the same location if you pass a resolution to do so early enough on. But you're still having two separate conventions, or however many separate conventions. So that's the one exception to that. Counties with multiple Senate districts, you have Senate district conventions. Your Senate district executive committee chair is the temporary chair of that convention. A Senate district executive committee which crosses a county line but doesn't cover the entire county, that first meeting is called by the state chair. That's something that hasn't been put into practice a whole lot, and that's why I wanted to hit that right here. So if you have a county, like in Tarrant County, we have 4 state Senate districts in the county. 3 of those state Senate districts cross into other counties. All 3 of those state Senate districts, the first meeting is actually supposed to be called by the state chair at any time after the new CEC takes office. We're going to be working with those counties and those Senate districts to get everybody used to that and have that going. If, however, in Tarrant County, like I said, 3 out of our 4 cross-county lines, we have one that is entirely within the county but does not cover the entire county. The county chair calls that meeting. If, for some reason, the state chair didn't call the meeting, or there was a vacancy in the office of Senate District Executive Committee Chair, immediately prior to ballot draw, then the election code provides that the county chair is supposed to call that meeting to fill that vacancy so that they have a chairman to organize their Senate District Convention. All right, let's talk a little bit about vacancy and nomination, or vacancy to fill or a vacancy in an unexpired term. Now, a lot of you guys are going to go through your entire career as county chair, 4 years, 20 years, 30 years. Skipper, how long has it been now?
Over 27.
Over 27. So we've got some county chairs that have been around for a while and have done some great service to the party. You may never experience this, or it might be the first thing you experience. There's two different things here. Let's talk about a vacancy and nomination. Vacancy and nomination occurs when you have an office up for election on your primary ballot. You get a candidate in there, they file, etc. Something happens after the 5th day before the regular filing deadline, but before the 74th day before the general election day. And your nominee gets appointed to a different office. And now they're not your nominee anymore. Or in some cases, and this has happened multiple times over the past couple of months, we've had nominees who passed away or were killed in a motor vehicle accident. In 2010, in Tarrant County, we had one who died in a fishing accident, a boating accident. In those cases, that creates a vacancy in nomination. The appropriate executive committee would meet to fill that vacancy. And when we talk about the appropriate executive committee, it could be a district executive committee, a county executive committee, or a precinct executive committee. In very rare cases, it could be the state Republican executive committee, but that would require a statewide candidate, a vacancy and nomination of a statewide candidate. So those are the items that can happen. Based on that, we'll tell you, based on what office is vacated, we'll tell you which executive committee. And typically it's the precinct chairs in that executive committee that meet together and elect a new nominee. They have to do that. The vacancy has to occur at least before the 74th day before general election day. And you have to do that, have that meeting and submit the certificate of replacement nominee to the county clerk or county elections administrator if it is a county or precinct office, or if it is a district or statewide office, state or district office, then you submit that certificate of nominee or replacement nominee to the Secretary of State's office. Along with that, you now are supposed to also make sure that you send that over to the state party as well. So if you have a replacement nominee you guys have voted on, make sure that you're sending that information to us here at the state party. And if it was a county or precinct executive, precinct office level, then you also need to send a copy of that certificate over to the Secretary of State's office. All this has to be done by 5 p.m. the 71st day before election day.
Brandon, is that per the rules or is that the election code?
That's the election code. That would be in the election code, and there's actually several chapters in the election code that deal with vacancies, death, withdrawal, resignation, etc. A lot of what you're going to be looking at, looks like I didn't get that section up there on the slide. Some of it's going to be found in different parts of the election code, some of it in the primary area, some of it in like 172, 174, and maybe 171, and other areas in the election code. So yes, it is defined by state statute when it comes to this. There's also the issue you have, and one other thing, while we're talking about this, if you'll notice, that vacancy can occur 75 days before the general election. You have to have it submitted, you have to have that replacement nomination certificate submitted by 5 p.m. 71st day. So you actually could have a scenario where you have a nominee vacate the office for whatever reason, and within 3 days have to fill that vacancy and get the certificate turned around and put in. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but that is a possibility. A vacancy in nomination or an unexpired term. So for an unexpired term, these are very similar, but they're slightly different. For an unexpired term, it's one that would not have normally been on the ballot this cycle. So you had someone who passed away in office, who was appointed to a higher level office. and they vacated their office partway during the term. It's going to depend on what office was vacated as to how that's handled, what executive committee handles that vacancy and nomination. Your time frame is the same as it was for that one. If it's after the 5th day before your regular filing deadline, but before the 74th day before general election day, your executive committees will fill that in most cases. There are a few cases where an executive committee may not, and it would actually fall to a special election. So those are things that you would want to consider there as well. Again, same drill. Make sure you get that submitted to the appropriate authority by 5 p.m. the 71st day before general election day, and make sure you copy RPT and SOS on that as well. Banking and finance. And with that, I'm going to take a brief pause. Do we have any questions right now?
What if the vacancy occurs after the 74th day before the election?
Okay, if the vacancy were to occur after the 74th day, I would have to go and dig through the code again on that one, but most likely on that one, it could trigger, depending on what office it is, it may trigger a special election, but it also could wind up falling on the next regular, I'm forgetting the term right now. Basically the next regular general election that you would have. So again, it's going to depend on next uniform election date. I only got the term there. The next uniform election date, which there are basically about 2 of those every year, or 2 of those every 2 years, sometimes 1 in odd number of years. Those would be your general election dates for state and county officers, which is typically in November, and I believe the municipal elections in May are also considered a uniform election date.
But if you have somebody pass, say, 30 days before the general election, so you no longer have a Republican nominee, you do have a Democrat opponent, what you're saying is, we're just hooked.
No, actually, so in a scenario like that, and what's been said before is these are very if-then heavy scenarios. If this happens, then this happens. But if this happens, then this happens. Oh, but if this, you get the picture. In a scenario like you just described, 30 days before the general election day, your nominee vacates the office for whatever reason, and there's a Democrat opponent. Your nominee's name still stays on the ballot. People can still vote for that nominee. If that nominee, if the Republican candidate wins, then we got to go and look and see how we handle that one. But I believe there's still a way to handle that. It does not necessarily automatically go to the opponent. So again, those are very if-then heavy scenarios. And like I said, this was a very 30,000 foot overview, actually probably more like 60,000 foot overview. If you run into this scenario, call us. I may be, because I've had to talk with the attorneys so much about these scenarios this year and research this, I've become more familiar with them. But I oftentimes still go to the attorneys. I'm not an attorney. I don't play one on TV. Occasionally I might dream that I'm one, but that doesn't count. I'm not an attorney. I don't give out legal advice. I try to help you guys as much as I can. But we always tell you, and that's another thing that we didn't really talk about. Develop relationships within your county with local attorneys that are good Republicans, that support the Republican Party, if you can, because you might have somebody that's willing to put on their resume that they were the party attorney and give you some pro bono work if you ever needed it. So developing those relationships is a really great idea.
Nice thing about election law, usually.
That's right.
Right, that's the problem. They usually don't know anything about election law. There's actually probably maybe a dozen attorneys across the entire state that are moderately or very familiar with election law. It's still good to have a party attorney, even if they're not necessarily familiar with election law. They've got the tools and resources that a lot of people don't have to go and look up case law, or maybe understand it a little bit quicker and easier than we can sometimes. So those can still be beneficial. Doesn't mean it's gonna solve all your problems, but it is a good idea to cultivate those resources if at all possible.
Yeah, one question.
Okay.
So I appointed my executive committee and had them fill out the paperwork. Do those applications for those precinct chairs, those need to be filed with the Secretary of State or not?
So,
Or do I
yes,
just keep those on my file or what?
you're gonna keep those on your file, but that's a really good point to bring up, and this is something, what you'll discover as you go through being a county chair is that every 2 years, and even in between the 2 years, things are gonna change. This election cycle was the first time the U.S. County chairs did not get a check from RPT during the primary for your share of the candidate filing fees. It's also the first time that you guys did not pay your county elections office or your voting system vendors directly. If you had any direct expenditures that you made on, for the primary, you paid those. If you, sent out mailings, or if you posted a notice or whatever, or if you ordered the ballots directly, then you would pay those, perhaps. But you don't pay your voting system vendors for the rental of machines, etc. You don't pay your county elections officer for administering the primary for you. Used to be that you would do that, but this cycle they changed that, and now everything goes straight between those different entities and straight to the Secretary of State. So it's being handled differently. And you'll notice the interface on the Secretary of State's website is extremely user-friendly. There you go. All right. So, obviously it's not the most user-friendly. Sometimes it's very, very difficult. Sometimes it's very cantankerous. How many of you guys got a runtime error this past primary season? I know there was more of y'all in this room. They got runtime errors or some kind of error with that site. I know because I talked to you. They do. I know that they do the best they can. They've got a limited budget, limited staff. It's frustrating for us as volunteers dealing with that. I understand that, but we do the best we can. They do the best they can. All that to address your issue, your question there. They now have it updated on their website with a section that they say is the current county and precinct chairs. You have a login for your county, a user ID, and you have a password that you can go and log in, and you're supposed to be able to add precinct chairs, you're supposed to be able to edit precinct chairs and delete precinct chairs, and also the county chair position. So SOS does have an interface there on their website for you to keep your precinct chairs and your county chairs up to date. We do also ask, if you would please, go ahead and send a copy. If you've got a spreadsheet or whatever that you keep track of, your precinct chairs, your county executive committee, for roll call, etc. If you don't mind sending a copy of that to us, we'd appreciate it as well. We do our best to try and help you guys. Sometimes things happen. You wind up with a new chair, and people are going, where are those records? We do our best to help you guys out. If you'll send us a copy of it, we'd appreciate it too. We'll try to keep up with those records as well.
Who is us?
Us is RPT, the Republican Party of Texas. Right now, I'm your interface at RPT. I'm hoping that I get to continue doing that for a good while. I really look forward to working with you guys and going through another primary cycle at least. It's a lot of fun, and I really enjoy the job, and I hope I'm doing a good job helping you guys. One last question, we're going to jump back into
So what
today.
address do we send that in?
Okay, that address is bmoore, B as in Brandon, MOORE, at texasgop.org. Of course, if you got an email from me, you got it. And if you got an email from me, as long as I didn't send it from my phone, then it's got my name, my cell phone number, and my direct office line on each of my emails. Also, sorry, say what?
Give that again, please.
Sure, it's B as in Brandon, MOORE, bmoore, texasgop.org. Texas is spelled out. And also, when we get to the end of the slideshow today, it's going to be up there on the screen as well. And when we load this onto exclusive content and let you guys know that it's there, then y'all will be able to get these slideshows, and it'll still be in the slideshow, so you'll have it there as well.
Brandon,
Yep.
so did you get a text into that? How long do we need to keep the paperwork for like precinct chairs? We don't send it.
Okay, so your records, election records, that type of stuff, should be kept for at least 2 years. So, and that's your cycle there. Keep it at least 2 years. Don't get rid of it before that. That also begs another good question. There's open records requests that you guys are subject to when it comes to certain documents such as ballot applications. With those, and we'll just cover this real quickly, one thing that I've learned from our attorneys, if you get a public information request for a candidate's ballot application, go ahead and redact the date of birth. That's been considered a common law privacy interest. So go ahead and redact the date of birth on that. We have had a few candidates who said, hey, I'm a judge, I've been a prosecutor, whatever it is. I've had death threats before. If somebody requests my information, please do not give out my home address. That's something that you guys can take into consideration, and if you get a request for that, say, candidate has asked that their home address be not be given out. If somebody wants to take that to court and fight it in court, they can do that. But sometimes for safety reasons, you do want to redact those. All right, jumping back into our slides, let's jump right into banking and finance. A really important part. A lot of you guys will call me and ask me questions about federal races or federal money, federal campaign FEC stuff, or TEC stuff. And I'll just be upfront and honest with you. Every time I talk to you on the phone here today, I'm going to tell you, go directly to the source. I'll do everything I can to help you. I'll try to answer your questions. I don't consider myself a really great expert on the campaign finance side of stuff. I've done some research, I know some stuff, but when it comes to the campaign finance, when it comes to ethics and the filings, there's some very real stuff there. You can be fined. You can have some bad publicity. So I'll answer your question as best I can, and I'll tell you, here's what I believe it is. But for this one, call the Texas Ethics Commission. Call them or email them. I'll give you the number or their email when you guys ask for it. It's really quite easy to find it on their website. Go to TEC, the Texas Ethics Commission. If you Google search it, or something gets lost in translation. Same way with the Federal Elections Commission. That's what I tell you guys. Go directly to the source. I'll do my best to help you out, but ultimately go directly to the source. Funding the party can be a leader's most challenging experience. However, with proper planning and organization, it can become a smooth running operation that not only produces much needed funds, but one that adds enthusiasm and energy to the party. Effective fundraising does require some work, but you can use proven formulas, budgeting, organization, and the like. And sometimes that's really important. People are going to want to see that you've got a serious plan in place, that you're disciplined before they donate, because they don't want their donations wasted. If they're going to contribute, they want to know that it's going to count. Have a good plan in place, and maybe you're really great at that. Maybe you need to bring in other people with that to help you. So part of it is just the resources and connections. Expand your network by bringing those other people in. Develop a finance plan. The first step in writing a finance plan is having a detailed budget. That's the keystone of overall county strategy. Defines in specific terms what you guys intend to do, how you're going to raise the funds, and how you're going to spend those funds. So develop that. Have a good cross-section of members. It's helpful for brainstorming and getting a good budget developed, and also good fundraising ideas and techniques and plans in place. Raising money, regardless of the type of fundraising, depends on one activity: asking for it. Across the spectrum, whether you're a county chair, a state chair, a national chair, a candidate, a campaign manager, it doesn't matter. When it comes to politics and fundraising, you have to ask for the money. It's a lot of times not fun, a lot of times not easy. And a lot of people don't like doing it. I don't like doing it, that's for sure. Although if I'm not the one, having to really do it, and I'm helping somebody else, it's a lot easier for me to ask for the money then, rather than if it's myself, if I'm asking for it for myself in that position. So I completely understand. A common reason for budget shortfalls is that people are reluctant to ask for a contribution or make calls to known donors. When considering who to appoint to the Finance Committee, look to those who have previously demonstrated a willingness to ask for money. Also, ask committee members to contribute to contribute to your funds as well. You know, your finance committee members should be helping contribute to that, you know? That doesn't mean that they have to donate in order to be on your finance committee, but it does show that they've got some skin in the game. Sometimes you'll find people that have really great connections and resources, but a lot of times you'll find those who make a personal donation will be more effective at fundraising. They've got some skin in the game. They're serious about it. Fundraising. There are many ways to fundraise. The best way for your county will depend on your particular community. What works in your area? You know your area. What's worked in the past? What is your community like? Some possible ideas. You can have a fundraising dinner. One of the common things you hear about are Lincoln dinners or Reagan dinners or a Lincoln Reagan dinner. Different types of fundraising dinners that you can have. You can do a bake sale. You can have a golf tournament. The golf tournaments are actually becoming pretty popular and can be very profitable. You can have an auction, silent auctions, live auctions. Just remember, you cannot do a raffle. State law does consider that to be gambling, so don't tip your toes in those waters of raffles. Just steer clear of that. Anything that could be considered gambling or anything like that, or a raffle, make sure and steer clear of it. Fishing tournaments, chili cook-offs, car shows, day at the range, ski tournament. These are just, again, different ideas. Come up with your own thing. There's not a wrong answer there, unless it's illegal. All right, your bank accounts. If there was ever a county chair before you, any time in the past, there might be a bank account there that nobody knows about. So you see what you can do to find out about that. Find out, and if the previous chair is still there, try to get them to go with you to the bank and get that signature card signed over and those accounts signed over. In my personal opinion, and again, you're going to know what's best for your county, but it's usually a good idea to have more than one person on your bank accounts, because if something happens to that one person, whatever it might be, it can sometimes be difficult to get everything signed over. If for some reason you can't find that the previous chair, nobody has an account, access to the account, ask around, see if somebody does. Go down to the bank, talk to them, take your photo ID. You can contact us, contact me, say, hey, I'm the new chair. You know, you were elected by the precinct chairs, we appointed you, whatever. The previous chair passed away, etc. We can write up a bank authorization letter and say, we appointed this person as the county chair. Please help them get access to the bank accounts. Yes, ma'am. Okay, minutes from the meeting. A lot of times, a lot of banks will want minutes from your meeting. That is correct. So take those documents with you. And if you want to preemptively ask for that bank authorization letter, we are happy to help with that. So just let us know. Be sure that the bank account has an employer identification number, an EIN. If you're coming in and there's a bank account already set up, contact the bank and see. What's it set up with? Is it set up with an EIN? Or is it set up with the previous chair's social security number? Or maybe a social security number from the chair from 1985. It's entirely possible. It's best not to have those tied to somebody's personal social security number. If that's the case, file for an EIN. There are step-by-step instructions on our website. Cassie Daniel, she went through, she took screenshots, and she shows you how to go in there and request an EIN. And which is an employee identification number on the IRS website. Get that and get that set up on your bank accounts. Do not go with the social security number. If there's a current treasurer, decide whether you're going to keep them or appoint a new treasurer. Sometimes there's reasons to go both ways. You're going to know what works best for your county and for you, but make sure that you look into that. Decide whether you're going to use one or two signatures on checks. Sometimes you'll default to it's always one or it's always two, or sometimes you'll say up to this dollar amount we're going to use, one signature is okay, but above that you're going to have two signatures. So allowing that and setting those processes up are very, very good ideas to protect the integrity of the party, yourself, and your bank accounts, so that there are no questions on those things. Use the same methods when opening a primary finance account, a primary election account. Remember, primary election funds are actually state money. They're taxpayer dollars. About 25% of primary funds come from candidate filing fees. The other 75% comes from state funds, which means it's taxpayer dollars. So with that, make sure you have a separate account, completely separate account set up for your primary election fund. No money other than primary election funds goes into or comes out of that account. Make sure you have checks or debit card, etc. And again, we're going to cover these in a lot more detail next year at our primary training. But these are items that you want to make sure of. Make sure you have ways of accounting for all that. And it should only be used for primary expenses. Keeping those separate. You must establish that separate account. You cannot commingle those funds. And again, make sure you have the check or debit card for expending funds. Try not to expend your personal or county party funds for primary expense and reimburse yourself, because that does raise a lot of questions. You really don't want to have the Secretary of State's office calling and going, wait a second, what's this? So make sure you have ways of accessing your money and utilizing that for the primary and keeping those funds completely separate. Suggested financial records, and again, these are just ideas. You may want to go more extensive, you may want to go more basic. The treasurer, or if there's not a treasurer, the county chair should maintain financial records containing monthly reports of all transactions. Summary should be given to the county chair as well as included in the minutes of the county executive committee meetings and report that. Even if you had no expenses, no activity, just put that in your report. That way people know what's going on. People know that, you know, it was a quiet month. You didn't raise any funds, but you also didn't spend any. You know, and then there's going to be times where you have a lot of activity. It goes in cycles. You guys know that by now. Busy and busier. Components of financial records will include bank statements, previous treasury reports, list of those who paid party dues, donor list of persons who bought tickets to fundraisers, events, etc. Your county chair duties. Let's talk a little bit about you guys as county chairs and what your duties are. While there are many parts to the party, county chair is an absolutely essential part. Why is the county chair an absolutely essential part? Because when it comes to local candidates whose office lies entirely within your county, if they want to run as a Republican, they have to file with the county chair. Whether it's a state rep, a state senator, a county commissioner, a sheriff, a county judge, a district judge, if their office lies entirely within your county, their district lies entirely within your county, they file with you as the county chair. In counties where we don't have county chairs for the primary filing period, it means we have no Republican candidates. Democrats will probably have some, because they really make sure that they've got the guy there that's willing to run 40 or 50 different primaries across the state. They'll put a county chair there in name only is what they do. They'll find somebody that they'll say, hey, you get $300, just let us use your name. We'll do all the work. That's not how it's supposed to work. You're supposed to find somebody that's going to do at least the basic functions. But that's why it's so important that we have you guys there as county chairs. Not only because you get to file, we get to have candidates there locally, and we can swing that county Republican or keep it Republican, but also because if we don't have a county chair, we don't have any precinct chairs, we don't have any Republicans, then when it comes to the election time, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? You might have conservatives, conservative Democrats, because it's a Democrat county, but yet they get cheated out of a fair win because of the tactics that the liberals can use. So be careful with that. That's why we want to make sure that we have a county chair in each county. What makes an effective county chair? Be active. You should participate in volunteer activities with campaigns, with the county executive committee. It's hard to ask people to come out and volunteer or block walk or phone bank if you're not willing to get out there and do it yourself. Even the big names out there, Ted Cruz, John Cornyn, Greg Abbott, you've seen the pictures, they'll go in, they'll make phone calls. Yeah, their schedule doesn't allow them to sit there for 6 hours and make phone calls, but they'll at least get out there and do a few phone calls. They'll get out there and block walk. You as the county chair should also be getting out there as much as you can. That doesn't mean you have to be doing more than anyone else. But get out with your volunteers, train them, and make them feel like they're a part of the team and that you really care and that you're putting effort into it as well. Be impartial. County chair should maintain an appearance of impartiality. It's one of the keys to success that a chair has the ability to be an arbitrator between various factions, while also exerting leadership to resolve those conflicts. The mere appearance of taking a side can damage your relationships and can damage your ability to affect the party. Lead by example is really what I would encourage you guys to do. When it comes right down to it, you have different factions that fight and get nasty with each other. Don't partake of that. Try and be as neutral and as impartial as you can, and help to grow the party, not divide it. Be inclusive. Remember, our mission is to grow the party. It doesn't help if we start excluding potential volunteers and potential new blood in the party. Of course, that doesn't mean that we're going to bring just anyone in. You know, they do need to be supportive of the principles of the Republican Party. That's why we have our platform. That's why we have our principles. Listen to these people. Consider their opinions. If necessary, redirect them to another one of the groups within your party where they might fit in really well. So be inclusive. Be organized. Running your primary election is a statutory obligation, but there's also a lot of other duties other than just running the primary. So be organized. Make sure that you've got your contract signed. Commitments for election judges are extremely important. Keep your receipts. As election day approaches, you're going to need to contact your volunteers, your election judges, etc., and make sure that you've got everything staffed. You're also going to want to make sure that you are able to contact them quickly and get in touch with your county clerk, elections administrators, etc. It also helps in recruiting new volunteers and keeping track of the ones that you got. Be responsive. As the county chair, your contact information is on the RPT website, unless you told us not to put it up there. But we do try to put at least an email up there, sometimes a phone number as well, usually a phone number. And I just remembered, I forgot to silence my cell phone earlier. All right, looks like we still have about an hour and a half left on our time, so we're about halfway through where we need to be. But being responsive, you might receive calls from campaigns, volunteers, as the Secretary of State's office, or you might receive a phone call or an email from me. Please return my phone calls and emails. I really do try to do the same as well. Always, you know, if you call and you need an answer and you can't get a hold of me or whatever, or, you know, the voicemail or the email gets lost, it's kind of a rare thing. At least I pretty well hope that it is. As far as I know, it's a rare thing. Feel free to call me again. I don't mind if you bug me, because you're not bugging me. It's my job to help you guys out, and I want to do everything that I can to help you. County chair duties. Republican elections. You accept applications from local candidates in the primary. You administer the primary. You manage primary election funds. You encourage voters to participate in elections. Help get out the vote. Submit names for election judges for early voting and election day. That's an extremely important step. It's one of our first steps in ballot in election integrity. Submitting names also for the early voting ballot board signature verification committee if you guys have one. Imposing clerks is something that some county chairs have never heard of, and we're going to talk about that here in a little bit as well. We'll get a little bit more in depth with that. Supporting ballot integrity and appointing and approving poll watchers, which is our last line of defense when it comes to ballot integrity usually. Republican conventions, you have a role there. If you're the county chair and you guys have a county convention in your county, you're probably going to be the temporary chair. You might even be elected to be the permanent chair. Submit delegates and alternates elected to serve at the state convention if you were elected as the permanent convention chair. Whoever is elected as that is their responsibility to make sure and get those records to us. Submitting resolutions considered by the platform committee to the state convention, permanent to the RPT, so they can be considered at state convention. Your county executive committee, try to help recruit and provide training for your precinct chairs. Appoint officers and committees as needed. We talk about those, customize it for your county. Calling and presiding over county executive committee meetings, and then maintaining minutes of all meetings and a roster of your committee members. Those are very helpful things for you, so you can keep your county organized, keep your people motivated and engaged. You represent the county party and you help spread the Republican message. You're a spokesperson. being that spokesperson to the local media, answering questions and putting out press releases, newsletters, etc. Speaking to organized groups and individual voters in the community about how they can get involved, and keeping RPT headquarters and SREC members informed of activities in your county. Remember that y'all are the face of the party. We're all the face of the party. When you're a Republican, we're always in the spotlight. So whatever you do in your personal life, whether you're going to the grocery store or anything, you know, we don't always have to be all dressed up. We can run out in our jeans and t-shirt. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. But how you conduct yourself and how you carry yourself personally can go a long way. Sometimes that one kind act can make all the world of difference for somebody. You're also the manager of the county party. You set up a headquarters if it's feasible in your county, where possible, and financially people will want to form a new one. Sometimes there's not any local clubs. Sometimes the county executive committee serves kind of as a Republican club and has regular meetings because that's all the interest there is, or the community is that small. But those are different ways that you can be involved and manage the county party. You help build the Republican Party, like I said, running a positive image of the party no matter where you are or when it is. Maintain rapport with the community businesses, neighborhood, and civic groups. In fact, got a question recently, and it may have been from Mr. Poteet, if I remember correctly, about the possibility of joining the Chamber of Commerce as a member, because you get invited to their events, you get put on their calendars, and you get promoted by them as well. Democrats apparently have figured that out and are doing that. So that's something that some of you guys have already thought about and already done. But other county chairs, that may not have occurred to them. Maybe their chamber isn't quite as active, or maybe that's just not a part of the community they've been plugged into. These are things that we learn from each other and can incorporate across the state. Welcome newcomers in the area, have them register to vote. A lot of you guys are asking about new movers list. With that, I will say we should have the second quarter update relatively soon. I will ask Spencer about that again, but I know that they were working on processing through all that data and getting the raw data into a usable format. That's stuff that I don't understand and I don't pretend to understand, but it's beneficial to you guys. Also, Spencer did say that they are going to try to start migrating that over into a more automated system, I believe it is, or a system where it will track the data a lot better. Because what they're getting is they're sending out new movers list and they're not getting data back. So they're going to try to get that into a system, I believe with the Advantage app, so that it will actually start generating that data back into the database where it can be tracked and it can be useful for everybody across the spectrum. As a county chair, you work with your SREC, your committee man, committee woman who are elected in your area. They serve 2-year terms. We have quarterly meetings. Occasionally we have a special meeting like this afternoon. Visit with them. See how you can help them. See how they can help you. Also, they're on our website. You can see all of them listed. Their contact information for most of them. And then also we live stream the meeting. So even if you can't make the meeting, you can watch it online if you'd like to. Precinct chair recruitment. How do you help grow your party and how do you get new precinct chairs in? Well, there's a lot of ways to do that. Some more effective than others, and in some areas it's easy, in some areas it's not. The entire CEC should be helping to do this and focus on this. The more people involved, the more workload can be spread. It also increases your party's efforts and your party's gains. You know, it's when you start working together, you think, oh, you know, I can do this much by myself, but if I have 3 people, then we can do 3 times as much. But sometimes you find out that it has an exponential factor. Sometimes the work of 3 people would equate to what 5 individuals can do. What you would do in 5 times the time. So you might find that it has an exponential factor. People and places that you may consider looking to recruit new precinct chairs. You can look in the GOP data center and find Republican voters in your county. The new movers list that we talked about, other political databases. Take a look at your friends, your family, your coworkers, people that share similar ideas, your neighbors, people at your church, Republican groups. If you have Republican groups there, they may attend meetings, but they may not be quite plugged into your county executive committee, and maybe they live in a vacant precinct. Social groups such as a book club, coffee group, Rotary or Lions, PTA, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, other parents in those areas, social media, people who like and comment on your political posts, previous Republican candidates, people displaying overtly Republican paraphernalia such as yard signs, bumper stickers. It doesn't have to be just Republican. It can be other associated groups, the military, the NRA, Texas State Rifle Association, etc. Precinct chair duties. Remember, you're not alone. Each individual voting precinct is entitled to be represented by a precinct chair on the county executive committee. It's established in the election code. Your party will be strengthened by recruiting and training precinct chairs and involving them in the decision-making process. I'll just stop and take just a real brief minute and tell you guys, I mean, I'm not quite yet 40 years old. I'm getting there way too fast. However, I will tell you, I've been involved in Republican Party politics for 20 years. I started in my late teens. I loved it when I got involved, and I've been involved ever since. But one of the things that was frustrating for me at first was how slow the process was. I'd be involved, and people would say, "Oh yeah, come make phone calls." And that was great. I enjoyed it. Here come stuff on envelopes. Come walk blocks with us. That's really great. And then I got to serve on the committee at my Senate district convention, and I thought that was really great. I had a lot of fun doing that. But when I went and talked, when I started asking, well, how do I get to go do this at the state level? You know, I heard about the state convention. This is great. It's a lot of fun. How can I do that at the state level? And one of my SREC members, and again, this was 15, 20 years ago. One of my SREC members was very kind and receptive and everything, said they'd consider it, you know. Whereas the other one, when I went and talked to them, essentially the answer that I got was, well, keep plugging away and maybe in another 20 years you can go to a committee and state or something. When you have young people, and we talk about wanting to reach out to the younger demographic and involve them, why aren't they involved? Well, yeah, okay, their attention span is shorter. You know, they get interested in other things. They've got better things to do with their lives, so they think. If you want to involve young people, sometimes you just have to bring them in, give them a place, give them a position, give them responsibilities. If they feel that they are actually contributing and not just being used, they're much more likely to stick around. Along that same line, I had a friend who was probably about 15 years younger than I was. Unfortunately, she was hit and killed in a hit and run accident and passed away a few years ago. But she was a Spitfire. Before Dan Patrick became lieutenant governor, when he was still a state senator, the first time I ever met her was at a Republican club. He had spoken, and this little blonde-haired 17-year-old high school student pops her hand up. She stands up and says, "What are you guys going to do?" I mean, we're sitting in a room of about 75 or 80 Republicans. What are you guys going to do to bring in people my age to get us involved? I go to high school just down the street here. You know how hard I had to work just to find out about this meeting. You know? I mean, and kudos to her for being involved. She was involved all the way through. Like I said, unfortunately, we did lose her. But that's the key. You find those people that are energetic and want to be involved. Don't run them off. Don't abuse them. Don't just use them and abuse them. Give them a role. Give them some responsibilities. In fact, we probably, if she's not, she may be here by now, Ashley Beckfold. If you guys have been to our meetings, or if you're out a little ways east of here, you may know her. She's a young college student who's been involved in her local party and involved in party politics for a while. She got to chair her Senate district convention, her county convention this last time. Involve these people. When you help them grow like that, you wouldn't believe what they can achieve and what you can achieve as a county party. And it has a net gain effect. When you bring in one, you bring in a lot of others. In 2014, we ran a phone bank out of our office in Tarrant County. We had high school students from the rather conservative part of the county that would come in, a conservative professor, and make phone calls for Greg Abbott, running against Wendy Davis. Found out one day, one of the students that was there was actually a Wendy Davis supporter, making phone calls for Greg Abbott. Because the Democrat phone bank wasn't any fun. And all her friends were over at the Republican headquarters making phone calls. Don't worry, the field director in our area was keeping a very close eye and making sure she wasn't spewing the day. But it's amazing the effect that can have. So involve them. Remember, you're not alone. Your precinct chairs, young people, people who are just learning about the party. Involve them. Give them a job and give them some responsibilities and let them and watch how much they'll achieve and grow. Goal of the precinct chair, it should be to help build and grow the party, especially in their precinct, but in other areas, maybe where there aren't precinct chairs, or where there's a precinct chair who doesn't have the time or isn't doing as much. They should know their area, help grow the area, achieve more voters both in the primary and in the general election, and be able to help their candidates and the party. And this job isn't just for the primary cycle or election cycle, it's a year in, year out thing. They can host coffees and other events and get to know their neighbors. Active precinct chairs can help produce an increase in Republican turnout in the primary and general election and deliver the Republican message to non-active and non-traditional Republican voters. That's what a good active precinct chair can bring you. Their functions is they help recruit volunteers. They're very vital, especially at that local level, because they're going to know the area. Just like you guys know your county much better than I do, because maybe I've never been there, or maybe I've been through there, but I really don't know it. You live there, you know it. Your precinct chairs should know their precinct. Let them be the experts and help them be the experts. They can help coordinate activities between the county party and the grassroots, and elected officials and candidates. They can help register voters. And let's talk quickly about registering voters. You have two ways that you can register voters. You can carry voter registration cards with you and hand it out to people and say, hey, here, fill this out and drop it in the mail. That's easy, but they may or may not actually drop it in the mail. You know, and it's easy because you can identify whether they're a Republican voter or not. And if you identify they're not a Republican voter, well, you don't have to send them a card. Or you can become a volunteer deputy registrar. If you do that, it kind of changes things a little bit. With that, you have to make sure that they fill out that card, they give it to you. You have a duty and obligation to turn that card in within a few days to your county voter registrar. So that's on you. Also, if you happen to be out there and you come across a Democrat and they say, I want to be registered to vote, you have to register them to vote as well as your deputy registrar. So keep those things in mind. Pros and cons on each side there. Your precinct chairs should help you get out the vote. They should help you achieve your voter ID efforts, know who the Republican voters are in their county or in their precinct, and then also help you get out the vote during the general election. So that's what your precinct chairs are going to help you do, among other things. They're going to encourage Republican favorable voters in early voting period and make the maximum effort to get Republican favorable voters out there in any way that they possibly can help. All right, precinct chairs can be election judges or election clerks. Oftentimes they are the election judge in their precinct. They can be, they don't have to be. That's probably one of the first places you're going to want to look, is to ask that person, you know, hey, can I appoint you as the election judge in your precinct? And we're going to talk a little bit more about how you do that and some strategies on how to do that later. But they can serve in that capacity. If they're not able to do so, try to see if they can recruit somebody. When I was the vice chair in Tarrant County, I did not serve as an election judge because I served as more of an emergency election judge or election clerk. Wherever there was a problem around the county, my county chair could send me. But I made sure that I found somebody in my precinct that was willing to take over and be the election judge for me. So they can pass that duty off. Maybe they want to be outside the polls instead of inside. Both are very vital functions. The precinct convention chair. Your precinct chair is, by default, the temporary chair of the precinct convention when it comes time for precinct conventions, if they're there and if they're willing to take the job. Sometimes they're too busy being an election judge and wrapping up the results, so they don't even have time to go to their precinct convention. They can make sure and tell somebody, hey, make sure you go there and make sure you put my name on the list to go to the county trustee convention. If they want to be a delegate to the county trustee convention, they should make sure that someone is there to put their name down on that list. Tools of the precinct chair. In order for precinct chairs to do the job, they must be supplied with the proper tools. You as the county chair can help them find these tools and get these tools to them. Make sure they have the platform of the Republican and the Democrat parties, or at least some of the basic fundamentals, so they can do a comparative analysis or be prepared to show the difference between the parties. And yes, a lot of you guys have asked about, or a handful of you guys have asked about the push cards that show the Republican principles and the Democrat principles and what people believe. We are getting bids on printing up more of those cards and seeing if we can get those available. Again, everything costs money, but we're going to do everything that we can. Make sure that your precinct chairs know what the county executive committee rules are so they can abide by them and they can help others with that. Make sure they have their county executive committee roster so they get to know their fellow precinct chairs and can coordinate with them. They should have a map of their precinct and all other of the jurisdictions that they're in. A lot of those can be found at District Viewer. If you go to Google and just type in District Viewer, it's like GIS.T1 or something like that. Go to Google, type in District Viewer. You'll see the state of Texas with all 254 counties. You can do different overlays for congressional, state house, state senate, state board of education, and Congress. So that's one place that they can get some of the maps. You can also get maps from your county offices for county offices, and then also from the land commissioner's office. You can get maps. And the appraisal district, that's another good place to get your maps from. Make sure that they have a list of all registered voters or access to getting those lists, such as in GOP Data Center, or the Block app like Advantage, or the phone bank app like Red Dialer. I know a little bit about some of these apps, but if you want to know more about them, our data guys can make sure that they get you set up on some of those things as applicable. Most of them usually have some kind of tutorial. There's tutorials in GOP Data Center to show you how to use those and make the best use of those. Also, they should have a list of all Republican office holders with contact information so they can stay involved and pertinent. List of candidates in upcoming elections, also with contact info if possible. A list of volunteers at and/or precinct convention attendees. Historical election results and typical polling locations for the precinct is also helpful for them. And they can, your precinct chairs might be able to tell you, hey, this polling location we've been using is terrible. We need to move it. We should move it over to this other place. They might be able to help you out there, or they might be able to get a place that's even cheaper than what you're currently using. Precinct chairs are most effective when they have the tools, the training, and the good guidance to do their work. So don't let that asset go to waste. Their CEC duties. While a precinct chair has multiple duties, they can pawn those duties off on other people. They can recruit other people to do those duties, to get out to vote, work the polls, work as an election worker. There's one thing that a precinct chair cannot give off to anybody else to do for them, and that is attend CEC meetings and participate in your county executive committee and votes, making motions, etc. Because proxies are not allowed at meetings other than the state Republican executive committee. So the one thing a precinct chair cannot have somebody else do is participate in CEC meetings. They can serve as an officer, a committee chair, or a committee member as part of how they can help the executive committee. They can help recruit other precinct chairs and volunteers, work precincts without precinct chairs, and assist the county chair as needed. Build a good relationship with your county chairs, or your precinct chairs, and they can be an invaluable asset for you guys. In the general election, let's talk a little bit about elections. I'm trying to do this as chronologically as possible when we're talking elections, because general is the next election we're coming up on, and it's the one we're going to try to focus the most on. Like I said, we'll cover the primary a little bit, but then that focus is really going to be next year as we get closer to that. General election is the culmination of everyone's hard work every 2-year cycle. We're focused on those November elections in the even number of years. Efforts of you, your CEC, volunteers, campaigns, and voter ID, get out the vote efforts, phone banking, block rallies, etc., all lead to this point. You as the county chair are a pivotal point in that, in making sure that those activities are happening and continue to happen and are as effective as possible. You set the tone in your county, and you help bring people together or divide people, one of the two. I know you guys have done a lot of hard work. And this is something I've said to a lot of you before. I know, even though I haven't been a county chair, I've been a vice chair, and worked closely with county chairs before. I understand that you as the county chair are the first person to be bribed at, and the last person to be paid.
Yep.
Now, the pay is all worth it, of course. But, so, you don't hear it often enough, but thank you. Thank you for the work that all of y'all do. We couldn't do this without y'all. Like I said, we wouldn't have the Republican candidates locally, wouldn't have the precinct chairs, we wouldn't have the efforts there. So thank you. It's also important that we focus on the integrity of the election. We do that by making sure that we have good staff at those locations, and we'll talk a little bit more about how we do that. In fact, one of the things is right here. Your first line of defense, election judge and alternate judge appointments. Each year, the County Commissioners Court appoints the election judges and alternate judges for each precinct. Now, they can decide that they're going to do those as 2-year appointments. The default is 1 year, but they could go 2-year appointments. You, as the county chair, have a duty to submit a list to them. The two major parties in the state, across the state, get to determine, that's how you determine whether or not it's a Republican or Democrat precinct. You go back to the most recent gubernatorial election, which in this case is 2014. And did the Republican candidate get more votes or did the Democrat candidate? That determines whether or not it's a Republican or a Democrat precinct. And that determines who's going to be the election judge, the presiding election judge, and who's going to be the alternate presiding election judge to begin with. So making sure that you have a list of people to appoint to those, you submit that to your county commissioners court. They make those appointments, again, every year. If you live in a large county, make sure that you have those submitted by June 30th. Is it 600,000 or is it 100,000? Okay. All right. So in the larger counties, you're going to have to make sure you have that submitted by June 30th because they appoint at some point during their July term. If you live in one of the smaller counties, make sure you have it done by July 31st. If you have a lot of precinct locations, a lot of polling locations, you're going to need to give yourself plenty of time to get this work done. There are some strategies that you can use here. I would recommend that first of all you focus on those precincts that are Republican precincts because that's where you get to appoint the presiding judge. Find the best people you can, the people that you can rely on to show up and run that election. Because if they don't, and guess what? It defaults to the alternate judge, which is a Democrat, and now your Republican precinct is in the hands of a Democrat election judge. We don't want that. So start by focusing on those Republican precincts where you get to appoint the presiding judge. Then move on to the alternate precincts, the precincts that are Democrat where you appoint the alternates. If you come from an area like Tarrant County, where I come from, a larger county, where they combine precincts together, you might have 4 or 5 or 8 different precincts in a single polling location. Usually they determine that one of those precincts is the key precinct, and that precinct determines whether or not that's a Democrat or a Republican location. So you don't have to necessarily find an election judge or alternate judge for every single county election precinct if they're going to combine those locations. Find out what those locations are going to be and what precincts are combined in them, and focus on those locations, making sure that you have a precinct chair in that key precinct location, that key precinct, so that you get to make those appointments and you're not handing them off to the Democrats. All right. And make sure that the people you're appointed on that list are eligible for appointment. They meet the minimum qualifications, which can be found in the election code, and we'll cover that more. Okay, there we go. That's what we pulled. So it's 500,000. Those appointments are your first opportunity to establish an election integrity. And again, make sure you're doing this. Find the people that are eligible, which means they have to be registered voters in the county. You're supposed to actually find people who are eligible and appoint them within a precinct. However, there is a provision in the code that if you can't find somebody in that precinct to appoint, you can appoint somebody from outside that precinct. But they do still have to be a registered voter or qualified voter in the county. Start your search early, as I mentioned. Find the best people to put in those key locations so that you don't lose those, and then work your way down from there. There are other ways, such as poll watchers and post clerks, to make sure you still have a Republican in other polling locations, but they won't have as much authority as the election judge. Again, this is your first line of defense. It is one of the most critical. Do not see those Republican precincts or even Democrat precincts into the hands of the Democrats solely. So strategize. Election judges, alternate judges, and clerks, refer to TEC Chapter 32 for further details. We talk about their eligibility or ineligibility. You must be a qualified voter of the precinct. Unless you can't find one in the precinct, then you can appoint from another precinct. There is also student clerks, such as Election Code 32.0511. The students as young as 16, there is a program to allow student clerks can get them involved in the election cycle and the election process and start recruiting great precinct chairs and election judges for the future. They're also a lot of times really eager and also really quick to learn. So don't pass up on those. People not eligible to be an election worker. If they're a contested candidate for public or party office, an election to be held on the same day as that election in any precinct in which the office sought is to be voted on, unless they're a county clerk or precinct chair, unless they're a county clerk or a precinct chair who is declared elected under Texas Election Code 171.0221. So if you have a precinct chair candidate and nobody filed against them, instead of being placed on the ballot, they are, quote, declared elected and assigned and posted at the polling location, basically. So they can still be election judges. The county clerk can still be an election judge or election clerk. But otherwise, if they're a contested candidate for public or party office, then they can't be. And notice it does say an election be held on the same day. So if you have two different elections held at the same time, and they're on the ballot in a contested race in one of them, they cannot be an election judge in the other one. At least that's how I'm reading that one. Also, if you're an employee or relative within the second degree by consanguinity, such as blood or kinship, or affinity by marriage, to an opposed candidate for public or party office in any precinct in which the office appears on the ballot, they are ineligible to serve. Campaign managers or campaign treasurers of a candidate in an election are ineligible to serve, and those finally convicted of an election offense in connection with conduct directly attributable to an election. Notice that does say finally convicted. That's a key word throughout the election code. So that means that they've exhausted all of their appeals process and the convictions. Powers and duties. Presiding judge is responsible for managing, conducting the election at the polling place. They have to maintain order, manage the clerks, ensure the laws are followed in the conduct of the election, preserve order, and prevent breaches of peace and violations of the election code. Both in the polling place and in the area in which electioneering or loitering is prohibited. It's the 100-foot marker outside the polling location. Presiding judge, remember, has the power of a district judge to enforce the laws and rules within that polling location and the 100-foot radius. Yes, that means they can issue an arrest warrant. So if you're particularly cross with a particular precinct chair or election judge, be careful. But also encourage your election judges to not let that go to their head because they don't want to wind up in trouble for issuing an arrest warrant frivolously. Compensation. Election judges and clerks can be compensated at a rate not to exceed the amount fixed by the appropriate authority, which must be at least the federal minimum wage. They cannot be compensated for more than 1 hour before the polls open or 2 hours after the polls close, unless it pertains to Section 62.014C, which is basically that there's a registration corrections list that they have to correct the rolls. I don't know how often that happens, but it can happen. I haven't personally seen it that I can recall. But with that one, if they do have to do that, they can actually be paid more than just that 1 hour before, 2 hours after, and during the election day if they're having to do that ahead of time and offsite. So such work can be done at a location other than the polling location before it's open for voting. Who's the proper authority? We talked about the authority that sets the proper authority setting the compensation rate. Who are those proper authorities? That's found in 32.093, a commissioner's report for an election ordered by the governor or a county authority. For a primary election, it's your county executive committee, so you guys get to set the pay rate, whatever you want it to be. However, remember, these are state funds. The state legislature has a budget, the SOS has a budget. That's where you're getting your money from for a lot of those. So you can pay a really nice sum of $15 or $20 an hour if you want. But anything above what SOS says that you can pay them, you're gonna have to come up with out of your own funds, your own party funds. So keep that in mind. That's the caveat there. Supplies and result returns. The election judge or clerk who delivers the records or supplies can be paid $25 if more than one person delivers that, and either one person gets it or they split it. Emergency appointment of judges. That's election code 32.007. Remember we talked about that list that you guys get to submit for appointment, etc. You can supplement that list up to the 20th day before a general election or 15th day before a special election. I will say that this has been kind of an issue of contention with county election departments and Secretary of State, because they say, hey, if you do this, we can't ever really have elections and establish who's going to be there, etc. So it's kind of an iffy one here. One thing I would like to point out in that section, subsection F is key because it requires if they do have to replace somebody, that replacement should be affiliated with the same party as the person you're replacing if possible. So the county clerk has a lot of authority here with this, but you still have a lot of sway with this. So study up on this, make sure that you guys understand the importance of appointing election judges and clerks and having the ability to supplement that list and make emergency appointments as well. Because if you give them enough Republican names that they can fall back on, they shouldn't have any option to not put a Republican in. Election judge, alternate judge, and election clerk training. SOS has developed materials and a standardized training materials that should be used to train election clerks and election judges. Elections ordered by the governor or a county authority, your county elections department must provide one or more training sessions. In the primary, your county executive committee is actually responsible for making sure those trainings happen. You can contract that out with your county elections department, let them do the training only, you can do the training only, or both of y'all can do training. I mean, I've seen that happen as well. You know, they'll go and get trained at the county elections department, and then you'll go and train them with the different things that you think that they need to be looking at and watching out for, that they're not going to get at the county elections department. Just remember that if you are providing training and your county elections office is not, you do need to make sure that you're using that standardized material and you're covering all the points that are required by the Secretary of State's office. And again, even if your elections office offers the training, they go there for training, you can still offer your own. Sometimes it's better. Sometimes it's an additional training, and it's helpful. Let's talk real quickly about signature verification committee and early voting ballot board. These can sometimes be one and the same. Sometimes the early voting ballot board is also the signature verification committee. In certain elections, the county clerk can decide to go ahead and establish a signature verification committee. If one is established, I believe it's a minimum of 12 members, if I remember correctly, and I think we've got that on the slide here in a minute. Signature verification committee, their purpose is to take a look at the carrier envelopes and determine if the signature on the outside of that envelope matches the signature of the ballot by mail application request. If it does, they pass it on to the early voting ballot board, and the early voting ballot board processes the ballot. They do not get to reassess that signature. If the signature verification committee determines that the signature should not count, then the early voting ballot board can, by majority vote, decide that it actually should count and go ahead and accept it. So your early voting ballot board there actually does have a little bit higher authority, and I apologize for the typo there, but consists of the early voting ballot board, which we'll call EVBD, consists of the presiding judge and at least 2 other members. In the general election for state and county officers, the county chair of each political party with nominees on the general election ballot shall submit a list of names for people eligible to serve. For the general election, you have to have that submitted by July or before July. For the primary election, you also get to submit names for that. But the county clerk or the early voting clerk determines what the deadline is for you to submit those. So find out from them what that deadline is. County Election Board also will join, The county election board will also appoint the presiding judge and the EVVV from the list provided by the party, which is what we just talked about. So again, if your county is a Republican county, then you get to appoint, your recommendation will be appointed as presiding judge. The Democrats will have all of it. Eligibility requirements are the same, and they have to be a registered voter of that county. Section 87.026 prohibits bystanders from being in the meeting place of the early voting ballot board during the time of board's operations, except as permitted by the code. So, for example, the county chair being present for administrative purposes, early voting clerk, who oversees the early voting ballot board, an appointed poll watcher, etc. Signature verification committee, so it must consist of at least 5 people. If there are more than 12 people, that's where I was getting 12. If there are more than 12 people, the early voting clerk may designate 2 or more subcommittees of at least 6 people each. And again, they determine whether or not signatures are valid by a majority vote. Poll watchers. They're a very important tool in your arsenal regarding election integrity, and they are your last line of defense. SOS has produced a very good poll watcher guide. I've taught numerous poll watcher classes, and that's what I use. I just go right off that book. You can highlight stuff in there and hit the really important points for them, and you can add to it the things that you have seen or that you've heard that have happened in your county or other places that they should be watching for. Who can appoint poll watchers? A candidate. If a candidate is running for an office that crosses county lines, then the candidate's campaign treasurer may also appoint. Political party with 1 or more nominees on the ballot. The county chair, in a political party with 1 or more nominees on the ballot, the county chair can appoint poll watchers, or any 3 members of the CEC can also appoint poll watchers. And the campaign treasurer or assistant campaign treasurer of a specific purpose PAC, an election on a measure in which the SPAC supports or opposes that measure. They can also appoint. Poll watcher is your last line of defense. You can appoint them anytime and send them to any location that you might have concerns about. So it's election day, it's 2 o'clock on election day, and you're hearing that there's problems over in this polling location. You thought you had it covered, you thought that place was fine. If you have poll watchers available, you can give them a certificate of appointment and send them there and have somebody there observing and watching and making sure everything's being taken care of. Again, you'll need to supply them with that certificate, which they'll present to the presiding election judge when they arrive. Remember, they're there to observe and report back to you. They are your eyes and your ears inside the polling location. They help you out. They don't have anywhere near as much authority or capabilities as an election judge or an election clerk. However, they are your last line of defense. Again, they can be appointed at any time. You're eligible to serve as a poll watcher if they are is not eligible to serve as a poll watcher if they're a candidate for public office in an election held on the same day, whether they're opposed or not. If they hold an elected public office, if they've been finally convicted of an offense in connection with conduct directly attributable to an election, or if they're employed by the employer of, or related within the second degree by consanguinity or affinity, to an election judge, election clerk, early voting clerk, or deputy clerk serving at that particular location. So if their sister is an election clerk at that location, they cannot serve as a poll watcher there. However, they can go serve in a different polling location in that same election. One thing I would like to point out, these are all things that make them ineligible. However, if they are related to or employed by a candidate on the ballot, they are still eligible to be appointed as a poll watcher. While there are many other important things to know about poll watchers, you should know that they can take notes. If they leave while the polls are open, the election judge may require them to leave those notes at the polling location, but they get to choose who they leave them with. They cannot have possession of, or else they must disable any mechanical or electronic means of recording sound or images. And the certificate that they sign in the presence of the judge is an affidavit that states they do not have possession of such a device or that device has been disabled. So they are taking a legal oath, filling out an affidavit to that effect. One thing to note, one thing that I emphasize for our poll watchers, if they leave a location prior to 5 continuous hours of service, the presiding election judge can say, you don't get to come back. If they stay that 5 consecutive hours, then that election judge doesn't have that option. Now, one thing I would like to point out with that, stepping outside the 100-foot boundary to make a phone call to report to you as the county chair, or whoever was appointing them, does not count against that 5 hours. So they can step outside that 100-foot marker, make their phone call and say, hey, this is what's going on at this location, county chair. Maybe we need to do this, and then they can shut their phone off and go back inside. And that does not interrupt their 5 hours continuous service. They can be present at any time the election officials are there, including setup, tear down, tallying, etc. They may accompany the election officer returning the results to the return centers. Now, when we say accompanying them, it doesn't necessarily mean that they get to ride in the vehicle with you. However, the election worker who is returning those results to the drop-off, the rally point, does have to drive in a reasonable manner that would allow any normal person to follow them. They can, as we said, they can step outside the 100-foot distance marker, make a phone call about the election, and it doesn't interrupt their 5 continuous hours. They cannot communicate with voters. Even if their best friend comes in or their mom comes in, they are not supposed to talk to them. They're not supposed to communicate with voters 99% of the time. Very, very rarely. Really, they're not supposed to communicate with voters. We'll cover one kind of exception to that here in just a second. They can communicate with election officials regarding any concern or questions they have in relation to the conduct of the election. If the election worker refers them to the election judge, they cannot discuss that particular issue with that election clerk any further unless the election judge invites that discussion. They must be allowed to sit or stand immediately near any election activity or assistance any election officials are providing. So they can't be told, you can go sit over there in that corner while we go help this person over here. No, that doesn't work. They're not allowed to do that. They're allowed to sit or stand conveniently near where they can observe any election activity going on there that the election workers are doing. If an election official helps a voter prepare their ballot, here's that one exception, or kind of exception we talked about. If a voter is there and they get the election official to help them prepare their ballot, then the poll watcher is actually allowed to inspect that voter's ballot to make sure it was prepared according to the voter's wishes before that ballot is being cast. So that's about the closest you ever get to where they can communicate with the voter, is to say, okay, looks good. Or, ma'am, did you vote? Did you intend to vote for this or whatever? Just confirming something. But again, they should be very, very cautious. They should be observing that as it's happening rather than asking questions. They are also allowed to receive an English translation of any language other than English spoken between an election official and a voter. All right. They're also allowed to inspect returns and records prepared by election officials. They cannot reveal how a voter has voted. That is a third-degree felony. If they happen to know how the voter has voted, because they got to inspect that voter's ballot, if they reveal how that voter has voted, whether the polls are open or the polls are closed, if they reveal how that voter has voted, that is a third-degree felony. So make sure they're not doing that. The following information they cannot reveal while the polls are open. Once the polls are closed, that's a different story. But while the polls are open, they cannot reveal how many votes have been received by a candidate or for or against the measure, the candidate's position relative to other candidates during the tallying process, or the names of people who have or have not voted. Those are election offenses. Those are offenses. They're misdemeanors rather than felonies, but they're still offenses. So, for example, they're there and they see that their neighbor or their mom hasn't come out and voted yet, and then another neighbor or the husband or whatever comes along. They can't tell their husband, hey, our son hasn't come and voted yet. Tell him to get over here and vote. That is illegal. Use your poll watchers wisely. They're an important tool. They're your last line of defense in election integrity. Remind your poll watchers of their importance and their function and thank them for their service, especially since they cannot be compensated for their time. Yep, it's a volunteer position. They don't get paid. So thank them for their time. They are invaluable. They're your last line of defense. And post perks, it's something we mentioned earlier and I said we'd get to and talk a little bit about this. A lot of people haven't heard about imposed perks. Texas Election Code 32.034B allows you as the county chair to submit a list of at least two people who are eligible for appointment as a clerk to the presiding election judge prior to the 25th day before a general election or the 10th day before a special election. The election judge must then appoint one or more of them unless, and here's the exception, if you provide a list to them, but they're in a location where it's them, the alternate judge, and only one additional clerk, and they're a Democrat, and the alternate is a Republican or whatever, and they get a list from the Republican Party, the Democrat Party, and the Libertarian Party, then that third person does have to be from that third list in order to provide for as much equal representation as possible. Not sure that I've ever seen that happen, but that is the case. Most likely, I mean, it's a relatively underused function in the code as it is. More than likely, you're going to be able to impose a clerk on that. And they do, as long as it is timely submitted, then they do have to use one of those clerks as long as they're eligible. Presiding judge must make the appointment within 5 days of receiving the notice and shall deliver written notification to the appropriate county chair. If the presiding judge hasn't been appointed by the time you must submit the list, then you can submit that to the county chair, whose candidate for governor received the most votes in the most recent gubernatorial election, and to the commission report. Such a scenario, the county chair or commission report will then appoint as provided by this section. Pro tip, make sure you send these lists via certified mail. Yeah, some of them may just ignore it and not sign off on it if they figure out what's going on. However, a lot of them have never seen this. Certified mail will sign off for it. You now have a record that they've actually received it. They can't say, oh, I guess it must have got lost in the mail. Nope, you got it there. All right, if a clerk causes a disruption in a polling place, and this is whether it's an imposed clerk or not, they can be removed. The county clerk may give them a warning, an oral warning. Following that, and with the concurrence of the county chair of the same political party that clerk is affiliated or aligned with, they can be removed or moved to another location. When they have to replace a clerk like that, then the replacement clerk should be affiliated or aligned with the same political party as the one that was removed, if at all possible. Don't think we can access it here right now, but that is a hyperlink to a sample letter that we use for the imposed clerks. So that's a sample letter. I wish that I could say that I was the creative one. I asked my former county chair, Jennifer Hall, as she was helping me. She had some of the old form letters that we sent to election judges to impose clerks on them back in Tarrant County. And she came up with Wile E. Coyote and Miss Piggy, and I wish I was that creative. So enjoy a good laugh when you go look at that, but also it's a good draft form letter for you if you're going to do impose clerks. Early voting. Let's talk about that a little bit. Texas Election Code in chapters 81 to 87 covers early voting, especially chapter 85 is what we want to focus on here today. That's conducted by the early voting clerk, which is your county clerk, your election administrator. In most cases, for most elections, early voting begins the 17th day before election day and continues until the 4th day before election day, unless it's a special or a runoff election. For state senator, state rep, or runoff primary election, in those cases, early voting begins 10th day before election day. If the first day of early voting falls on Saturday, Sunday, or legal state holiday, and the first day of voting is the next regular business day. Early voting by personal appearance must be conducted at the main early polling location on weekdays. The early voting period and during the county clerk's main business office, if they're regularly open for business. However, if your county has a population of more than 100,000 or more, then during primary and general elections, voting at the main early voting location must be conducted for at least 12 hours on each weekday of the last week of the early voting period. For a special election ordered by the governor in a county with a population of 100,000 or more, main early voting location must be open for at least 12 hours the last 2 weekdays of the early voting period. A lot of information to digest there. You're welcome to go back over it. And what I would encourage you guys, start looking through the election code. It's written kind of an odd way sometimes. It's legal jargon, obviously. A lot of these are attorneys that wrote this stuff. As you start reading through it and you start talking to other chairs or talking to us, then you'll start kind of understanding what they mean with what they say. It's a little different, but you can grasp it and start learning that stuff. And it's surprising. The county clerks and county elections administrators that don't know certain parts of the election law, some of them know it very well. but there are others who don't know it. Some of them, I mean, this past primary, I dealt with some election administrators who had just been on the job for a few months, you know? I know in a particular county where they had an election administrator and a deputy election administrator. The deputy is from North Carolina, so they don't really know state law. They've been here for a year or two now. They don't know our state election law. And then the election administrator, they were born here in the States, but when they were 5, they moved to South America with their family and lived out of the country until they were an adult, moved to California, and then got a job here in Texas as an election administrator in a major urban county, having just moved to Texas and not knowing the election law. That one really baffles me. But it can happen. So, brush up on your election code. You'd be surprised at the times that, I mean, you can point to it and say, hey, guess what? Call us for some help if you want. We'll do what we can. Or call the Secretary of State's office, their elections division. When you guys do them before, call them or email them, get their interpretation on something.
No.
All right, elections in a county population of 100,000 or more during the primary and general elections, voting must be conducted for at least 12 hours each weekday. Period. Covered the rest of that. The point of this was, this also applies to counties under 100,000. If the county clerk or early voting clerk receives a written request for extended hours submitted by at least 15 voters of the county, as long as it's received in enough time for the clerk to comply with requirements of 85.067, which in short interpretation basically requires that the notice be posted continuously for 5 days before the start of early voting. Early voting is also conducted on the last Saturday for at least 12 hours and at least 5 hours on Sunday in counties with a population of 100,000 or more. And the same thing applies here if the county is under 100,000. If 15 voters or more request for those extended hours, and as long as there's enough time, and in this case it's a 72-hour notice requirement, then you're going to get those extended hours. While early voting belongs to the county because the county clerk is the early voting clerk, remember, you have a say in this stuff. You have a lot of say with your appointments or your recommendations, the list that you submit to these people. The presiding judge and an alternate presiding judge for the main early polling location and the branch polling location are appointed in a manner similar to election day judges and alternate judges. You submit lists, they pick from that list. The clerks are appointed in a manner that provides equal representation to the extent possible for each political party holding a primary election in the county. And the county clerk may reject the list if people were submitted or determined to not meet eligibility requirements. The list must be provided to the county clerk before July of each year, as we mentioned, for general elections and in the primaries, unless it's a joint primary, but in primaries for the most part, the county clerk is going to set that deadline, so make sure you know what that deadline is and get them the list so that they can appoint from that. Election day. Much of the duties for election day come before election day, as you may have already seen. Appointing the election judges and clerks, both early and election day. Appointing members of the early voting ballot board, signature verification committee, imposing clerks, appointing poll watchers, training your judges, clerks, poll watchers, etc. All that happens before election day. But that doesn't mean that you're home free on election day. In fact, not at all. There's still a lot of work to be done there. Be available for your judges, your clerks, your candidates. They might have questions. An issue might arise. Make sure you're available. You know, if you have a headquarters, staff it. Man the phones. If you don't have a headquarters, you can do a temporary headquarters around election times, or you can just make sure that they have your phone number and email, or several people's phone number and email. One thing that we've done, that we did in the primary and the primary runoff, we set up my cell phone number that you guys have, the 512 number for my cell phone, is actually a Google Voice number. With that Google Voice number, it can forward to other numbers simultaneously. And so what we've done is we've had several of us that when I receive a call at that Google Voice number, it rings multiple phones at once. So you can set up a Google Voice number and have it ring to several phones at once and provide help to your clerks, candidates, etc., and election judges. Be prepared to field questions from judges, provide them with the assistance they need, dealing with the Democrats, dealing with the county elections office, etc., voters, who knows what. Sometimes they'll call you because they've got a voter that they can't decide, they can't confirm whether or not they're at the right place to vote. They called the elections office and they can't get through to them. you might be able to help look up that person for them. Keep in touch with the county clerk or election administrator. You may need their help in dealing with some of these issues. The more you can cultivate those relationships and have a good relationship with them, the better off you are. Sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes it just can't. But do everything you can to make that a possibility. For the primary, have emergency election teams so that if you have somebody who shows up or who doesn't show up because they're sick or they got called out to work or they had an accident. I've seen it run the gamut. I've seen people who passed away right before election day. I've seen people who came down sick, got called into work, got in an accident on the way to the polls. Anything can happen. Have some emergency teams ready to be dispatched at a moment's notice. In general, your county clerk or EA should be doing this. However, you can provide them with names of people who say, hey, I'm willing to go to a moment's notice wherever you need me anywhere in the county. Sometimes they have a hard time finding people to do that. If you're supplying them with names, it's a good chance that they're going to take your people. Make sure the general public also has a way of contacting the local party. Many people will look to the party to know, where do I go vote? You know, what do I do? Who do I go vote for? When did the polls close? Many county chairs wind up going over to the central counting station where all the results are returned back in. Some of them do that so that they're there and they can see the results as they come in as quickly as possible. Some of them do it because if an issue arises at a polling location after the polls close or during the tallying process or whatever, they're going to know about it right away. So that's something you can consider doing as well. Other election activities, campaign sign locations. You could be a campaign sign location. In the primary, it's a little bit more difficult. But if you have an office, just open it up for all of your candidates. Say, hey, if you've got signs, you can bring them up here to the headquarters and put them there, and people can come and pick them up. In the general election, again, do the same thing, but also here's another step that you can do. And this is actually going to be a whole lot of fun. You can pool resources together, your people together. Volunteers that you have, volunteers that different campaigns have. Not only be a location that people can come and get signs, but on election night, you can get teams together so that they can put out signs for all of your Republican candidates at a particular location. You can divide those teams up and cover a lot more ground than if each campaign were doing their own individual work and headed to 200 different locations. So you can cover a lot more ground that way. During driving the voters to the polls, I've seen people who say, I don't walk, I don't phone bank, I don't do anything, but you know what? On election day, you got somebody that doesn't have a ride to the polls and they need a ride, you give them my phone number. They'll go pick them up. They'll spend the gas time, they'll go pick them up and drive them to the polls and drive them back home. Phone banking, as I mentioned, there's GOP data center that you can pull phone lists from, but then there's also Red Dialer, an app that you can use on your cell phone to make phone calls and get that information entered into databases, if I'm understanding that correctly. Again, I'm not the data guy, so I'm not going to pretend like I know, but I have a vague concept of it. Block walking, again, GOP data center, but also the Advantage app. That one I actually have used before. It is an app on your cell phone that you can use to record that data as you're out block walking and getting that submitted. Other things you can do. Sometimes, you know, we're talking about block walking here, and I come from a major urban county where the front doors are 75 feet apart. It's easy to block walk there, you know. I can hit 10 doors on the street, you know, that are all Republicans. But some of you guys are in the more suburban or rural counties, and the doors are several miles apart. So block walking turns into block driving, and literature drops at the front gate because, you know, you cross that front gate and you might get welcomed with a shotgun. So I've heard. I have not personally experienced. Y'all be careful out there. But other things you can do. You can have booths at county fairs, at festivals, at gun shows. Get out there and meet the people. Show them what the Republican Party is. Voter registration drives. Remember, voter registration takes 30 days to become effective in the state of Texas. We talk about the mail-in cards versus the volunteer deputy registrars. Another important aspect that you can do in relation to elections, candidate coaching, mentoring, or assistance. Sometimes you have candidates that don't have a consultant or a campaign manager or a campaign staff, or maybe they have some but they're part-time. something slipped under the radar. You as the county chair, sometimes you need to function in different roles. You can be a mentor, you can be a consultant, you can be a campaign manager. They need that strategy. I got to personally witness the fact that we have some really great candidates. Sometimes there's certain things that they miss, they don't understand. I've seen the county chair offer to manage a candidate's Facebook and Twitter because they were getting themselves in trouble on it during early voting. So instead of saying, I'm blocking you from your Facebook and Twitter and taking this away so you can't be stupid on it, they said, here, let me help you out. Be creative with it, but identify the places that you can help your candidates the most. And in the long run, maybe they realize what you really did, and they go, you know what? I really appreciate that, and you handled it with such grace and elegance. So that's something we can do. All right, let's talk a little bit about primaries. Again, we're going to overview this really quickly. Filing period. The primary occurs every 2 years. In the spring of the even-numbered years, the primary occurs every 2 years in the even-numbered, in the spring of the even-numbered years. The filing period for the primary is early to mid-November and early to mid-December of odd-numbered years for county chairs and public office candidates. Precinct chairs, remember, it starts 2 months earlier in early to mid-September. Candidates who want to run as a Republican must file an application to place on the Republican primary ballot. And candidates seeking office, which is not contained entirely in one county, they file with the state chair. If the office you're seeking is entirely contained within a single county, they file with the county chair. And remember, if there's no Republican county chair in that county, you can't be any Republican candidates. You have your statewide and your multi-district, your multi-county ones, but no local candidates. And we don't want to give the Democrats 1 inch of ground. So make sure you're covering those, help us find those county chairs that we can rely on and will do the work. County chair candidates also file during the same period. If you're a county chair, please remember, if you want to be the chair again, you must file again. Yes, you accept your own filing. Precinct chair candidates must also file. However, they have that 3-month window. As we talked about, the last day of filing, all candidates, public office, county chairs, and precinct chairs is the same day at the same time, early to mid-December at a given time, usually 6 p.m. The only exception to this is if you have an extended filing period that was triggered by the resignation, death, or withdrawal of a candidate in a very narrow window there, then that could trigger an extended filing deadline. That would push that a little later for that particular office or offices. Shortly before the beginning of the filing period, the Secretary of State conducts training, as I mentioned. It's usually on a Friday. They focus on the job of the county chair in relation to the primaries. The next day, we do the same thing, except we break it down in bite-sized pieces to make it a lot easier for you guys, to give you the tips and tricks of the trade, and to allow you to converge with each other in a friendly environment where it's just Republicans, not a mix of Republicans and Democrats like is at the SOS training. So there's some things that we can cover there that we wouldn't talk about. We don't want to give away our trade secrets, our protests. We don't want to help them know about imposing perks on our Republican county chairs. So we're not going to discuss that there. We'll do that at our own training. SOS publishes an election law calendar. We also break that down. I'll give that to you, the pertinent portions of that to you guys for the county chairs. On exclusive content, this is just a really brief overview. We have a candidate packet. You guys can use as much or as little of this as you want to. Customize it for your county. Some of what's included with a table of contents. We have an acknowledgement of receipt of packet so that when we get that back, so we know that we've given them the packet, they can't later say, but I didn't get one. Yeah, well, you signed for it. A letter from the county chair to the candidate, the platform overview, frequently asked questions about the candidate platform review, candidate contact info form. We create those and say, hey, stuff outside the box is public information, stuff inside the box is private information. Make sure we have a good way to get in touch with you directly or your campaign manager, because if there's an issue with your application that is fixable, we want to know that we can get a hold of it. They don't always listen to that, okay. And if they want the public to be able to contact them, then they put the other information in. Instructions for GOP data center access request and the application for it. the important 2018 primary election dates, or whatever the election is at the end. Helpful contact info for candidates, political advertising guidelines for TBC, rules for posting campaign signs, campaign sign ordinances, and then we have a memo about complying with Rule 43 for RPT. Lots of other forms, certificates, etc., but another important item you'll find are the ballot review checklist. This is something that the RPT organization department and the attorneys have worked on and developed over the years and maintained over the years. I will tell you they're very, very helpful because they break it down by the different categories and they show you, you know, the candidate has to have been born on or before this date. They have to have resided or become registered in the territory elected from on or before this date. This will be very, very helpful. There are lots of other resources and exclusive content. Part of this training session that we're doing here today, we're also planning on taking this on the road over the course of the next month and a half or so throughout the state. And in doing so, part of what we're doing with all of these training materials, in addition to developing this and presenting it here and putting it up on exclusive content, is to overhaul exclusive content. We want to make sure that everything is updated. We may rearrange it in a slightly different manner, but if you have any input for me on something you'd like to see on there, or different tips or tricks that you guys have that you're willing to share with other county chairs, and we can include on there, please let me know. All right, for the primary, you'll likely want to contract with your county elections department to help conduct the voting, because having to get all these machines and equipment and everything else can be quite time consuming. You can contract with them and you can specify different things that maybe you handle payroll, maybe they handle payroll, different items that you can specify in that contract. There's three basic types of contracts. A joint primary where polling locations, election workers, and election equipment are shared. Basically, it's just like on general election day, where you have a Republican and a Democrat and a mix and everything, and everybody goes to the same place. You can do a separate primary where polling locations, workers, and equipment are all completely separate. Each party has their own location, their own workers, their own equipment. And then you have shared locations, which is essentially a hybridization of the two. You have separate primaries, not joint primaries, so each political party conducting the primary has their own workers and their own equipment. They're just sharing the location. So Democrats are over here. Me, this is my left. Democrats on the left, Republicans on the right. We're trying to set up intuitively if you can. If you choose joint primary or shared locations, you'll need to work with your county clerk or EA and the Dems to determine the number and placement of your polling locations. So there's pros and cons to all of those. In a joint primary, you don't have to have as many election workers. It costs the taxpayers less. However, you are allowing Democrats to have some level of control in a Republican primary, and vice versa for them as well. Whereas if you do completely separate, you have to have a lot more workers, a lot more locations, and it costs more. So there are some counties where there is simply not enough workers to do anything other than a joint primary, from what I've been told, from talking to different chairs. So you know your county, figure out the one that's going to work best for you guys. Elections. Maintaining the peace between the different factions during the primary can be a very daunting task, but it is a very important task for you as the county chair. When handled properly, you can finish the primary with volunteers from opposing campaigns being ready to work together for the nominees in the party in November. How do you do it? Be fair. Treat all your primary candidates equally. When someone brings you an issue with another faction, no matter how small it may seem to you, take the time and listen to them. If they feel that they've at least got your ear and that you're considering it and you take it seriously, that will go a long way. You may not be able to solve their problem, but the fact that you listen helps. Sometimes they just realize they just needed somebody to listen to them. And ultimately, lead by example. Show them the way, and a lot of times they'll follow. Sometimes it takes them a little while, but hey, they get there. County Chair Administrative Duties and Texas Election Code 172.1113. This is a helpful trick for you, or a helpful hint for you. As the county chair during the primary, the election code now says the county chair is allowed in the polling place for administrative functions. Previously, this was not the case. This has been the case for a few years now. But you can go in there and make sure you're sticking around for administrative functions only and not abusing it, especially if you're in a contested election or anything like that, because the election code is kind of vague. But make sure the election is running smoothly if you need to in that location. If you have an area that's of concern, utilize this tool at your disposal. Party switchers. So party switchers are when elected officials who ran in one party's primary and were elected decide that they actually are now a member of other party. Some of them may truly have had a change of heart. Some just may realize what each party stands for, and yet others may do it because their area is becoming more Republican and they want to continue to be elected. These are prime opportunities for you as the county chair to help them convert and start growing the party in your area, depending on your county. This may work to your benefit, it may not, but find the ones that are. A local Democrat elected official who is popular and well-liked, but whose beliefs are more closely aligned with our platform could be the catalyst. If you're in a swing district or a Democrat county or a lean Democrat, that could be your catalyst for starting that transition and turning your county into a good Republican county. Solidly red. Make a list of Democrat incumbents that you have identified as possible party switchers based on their beliefs and the potential of convincing them to switch. You might want to rank them or prioritize them, focus your efforts. If an incumbent is going to switch, some of them may wait and just file with you instead of switching in the middle of the term. Others may want to switch earlier on in order to head off possible competition, especially if the county is starting to swing Republican. So they may want to, that may be their motivation in doing that. Welcome your party switchers, let them know, let us know here at RPT so that we can document that. Help them learn about and get acclimated to the party. And again, pros and cons with this. Sometimes you wind up with people who are really Democrats and just doing it so they can get elected. But sometimes you wind up with people who are like, wait a second, I've been a Democrat for 50 years. I was raised Democrat. My mom, my dad, my grandpa were always Democrat. You know, and they finally realize, wait a second, this is what Democrats believe? I didn't know that. So you never can tell. Legislative session. Texas legislature meets every 2 years and odd-numbered years for about 140 days, from early mid-January to mid to late June. As a county chair, you don't have any specific duties related to this necessarily. However, there are a host of opportunities here. Consider organizing or participating in legislative days during or even between sessions. Organizing such activities, especially around certain issues that are important to your county, to your area, to the people in your area, can wind up giving you an opportunity to recruit new volunteers and members into your local party. Even though you don't have any particular duties or obligations relating to the legislative session, there are ample opportunities here to help you grow the party and make a difference. Candidate recruitment. Depending on your county, there may be a lot of work to do, or maybe not so much. If you're in a really solidly red Republican county, you may not have a whole lot of work because you don't want to recruit candidates against your incumbent Republicans. However, that doesn't mean you don't have anything to do. There's farm teams. You have local elections, school district and municipal city elections, mud districts, etc. Local college districts that tend to be a lot of times heavily populated by more liberal folks who want to take money and spend it, take your money and spend it on a variety of factors. So you can focus in those areas and start helping to groom a farm team. For one, you can start swinging those local elections to a more conservative bent, but for another, you're helping those individuals who have Republican credentials or who lean Republican and can make good candidates for higher office later on. We may have a Republican office holder who says, you know what, I'm retiring, I'm done with it now. Or they move on to something else. So this can be your farm team. Obviously, if you're in a more Democrat area, you have ample opportunity to recruit candidates to run against Democrats, and obviously in open seats. Some things you might want to consider. What offices is it that need to be filled, and which ones are you going to target? When recruiting potential candidates, look at their skills, look at the resources, look at their strengths. What did they bring to the table? Match those. Do your best at matching those skills and those personalities with the different offices that you think are good targets that you could possibly swing to the Republican side. Remember, past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior, and remember that the devil is in the details. Sometimes it's the little things that people do. It may seem insignificant, but it tells you what the character of that person is. You know, when you're recruiting a candidate, you may not know how they're going to vote on the budget. You may not know how they're going to vote on particular issues. But when you pay attention to the details, that tells you their personality and what their bent actually is. Do your homework, research their background and histories before moving forward. If you don't, your opponents will. The last thing you want is somebody with a bad mark on in their history being your Republican nominee and that not coming out until the general election. So, yeah, we don't want to dig through everybody's dirty laundry, but if you're recruiting candidates and you're a county chair, it sometimes pays off to do your homework. It's a sad thing, but it is also a true thing. Potential places you can recruit: local business owners, Chamber of Commerce members, church leaders, PTOs, parent-teacher organizations, precinct chairs and political activists, and current and former military are among a few of the places that you can look at. Once recruited, give them as much support as possible. It can include advice, help with connections, financial support, etc., or just general guidance. Help them with the two things that are usually the hardest for candidates: asking for money and asking for votes. The two things that a candidate should be doing are some of the things that they have the hardest time doing. They can get their elevator speech down half. But sometimes they have a hard time asking for that money so that they can get their message out there. Sometimes they have a hard time remembering that after that 5-minute elevator speech, okay, 30-second elevator speech, they should close that with, hey, can I count on your vote? So help them remember those things. Help them learn the ins and outs of campaign finance and compliance. Sometimes it's as simple as pointing them to TEC or your local campaign filing with your county clerk. And encourage them to spend their time wisely. What meetings should they go to? Should they go to meetings? Sure, they should. But should they spend all their time in meetings? No, they should not. So help them know where to spend their time, how to spend it wisely. When do they go to meetings? When should they be walking? When should they be phone banking? When do they do their voter ID efforts versus switching over to their get out the vote efforts? Identify those things. As a county chair, that's part of your process, whether we're talking about helping candidates or whatever. You spend that first part of the election cycle IDing your voters. Who are the likely Republican voters? Not just based on walk lists that you pull out of GOP data center. If you're doing phone banking or block walking, putting that data back in the data center or Advantage or Red Dialer, and or keeping your own records, 75 of your absentee ballot people that you know are Republicans and saying, hey, did you request your ballot? You need a ballot. We can send you the application. Did you already send it in? When early voting opens, encouraging the people, you tell them, get out there and vote, get out there and vote, keeping track of this. All the way through up until the polls close. All right, some closing thoughts, guys. The primary final cost report is due to SOS by August 31st. We're right here at the end of the primary season. That's one of our last deadlines associated with it. You still have most of the month left. If you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to me. I'll do my best to help you. But again, EFM admin at sos.texas.gov, EFM election funds management admin at sos.texas.gov, or you can just call their 800 number. That's 800-252-2216 and select option 3 if you want your election funds management team. If you want your legal department, push option 2. Remember, please check your emails for important information. Please don't ignore my emails. I try my best not to spam y'all. What I put out there, please read it carefully and thoroughly. I only try to send information that's pertinent to your job as a county chair or helpful, and not just inundate you with emails. So please, and if you haven't already done so, add my email, bmore@texasgov.org, to your favorites, etc., so your spam filters don't block that. Again, that's bmore@texasgov.org. As a county chair, you'll be interacting a lot with your county clerk or elections administrator. A good relationship with them can go a very long way in making sure that in helping you through what can be a very stressful and difficult job. Do your best to cultivate good working relationship with them, with election judges. They can help you set polling locations, your precinct chairs. Don't take anybody for granted. the more people you have involved in helping you, the better off you are, and the easier things should go for you. RPT Rule 8B requires that all county party rules and bylaws be filed with the SREC and the Secretary of State's office. If you email them to me, I'll make sure that we have them on record. I have a folder in my email that I move those over to, so that anytime I'm getting precinct chairs for county party bylaws sent to me, I move those over into a folder so that I can keep track of those. It's also helpful if you keep your precinct chair list updated with us at RPT, as well as keeping it updated on the Secretary of State's website. The new County Chair Handbook is available in exclusive content. It's under other party resources, and right along with that is the new Precinct Chair Handbook that the SREC Party Organization Committee developed. Does your county party have an EIN for bank accounts? That's also in exclusive content. There's step-by-step procedures there for how to get your EIN so that you can set that up with your bank accounts. Exclusive content, again, that's texasgop.org. If you scroll down to the bottom where the footer is, right-hand side at the bottom of that list, it says exclusive content. It is password protected. There's a password on the screen for you guys. Remember, this is really only for SREC and county chairs. Now, when you look at this, guys, what I've always told you guys when I do the webinars and everything else, you guys know your local party. You guys know your people. And I trust them. Don't give this out widely and broadly, but if you have a particular precinct chair or a few precinct chairs or officers that are helping you out, and you feel that they would benefit, that your county party would benefit by giving them access, I'm okay with that. This is resources for our county parties. GOP Data Center access, you can complete the access request form, which you can get it off this slide, you can get it by emailing me, or you can get it from exclusive content. It's there as well. You can download that, fill it out. It is like a 7 or 8 page document. If you're a county chair, precinct chair, activist, whatever, fill out the first 2 pages and get the SREC or county chair to sign off on it and send those to us. Don't worry about the rest of it. The last 4 or 5 pages are for campaigns. So if it's for a campaign, then you need to fill out the entire thing, the first 2 and all the way through to the end. All right, we do monthly leadership webinars. Our next, the ones that we have set up, typically we do those on the last Monday of each month at 6:30 p.m. Again, that is typical. It is not always the case. For the next couple of ones, August 27th, 6:30 p.m. September 24th, 6:30 p.m. October 29th, we moved that one to 7:30 p.m. Why? That's right, you're in early voting. Wanted to make sure that we're not starting until after the polls closed at that point. And we're not doing one at the end of November, the last Monday in November, because that is the Monday after Thanksgiving, which also happens to be Cyber Monday. I'm not sure how well the computer systems are working. So we moved that one to the next Monday, which is the first Monday in December, December 3rd at 6:30 p.m. We'll do that one. That'll count for both November and December, because we'll be past the elections and headed toward the ledge session and the holidays. I don't think anybody really wants to try and hit one the last Monday of December. All right, that's our last slide, guys. That's my contact information. That's I got my office phone, my cell phone, the fax number, my email. I appreciate your time. Again, I do plan on taking this on the road. We're going to try to hit another 4 or 5 cities around the state at least. To help promote this, we're going to be sending out those event links and invites. One thing I would like to say to you guys, we'll take a few minutes to answer questions here, maybe about 5 or 10 minutes here. 11:45, we're at 11:25 right now. We're set for lunch over straight across the hall. It's Guadalupe Orton Creek. We'll have the doors open. We've got lasagna, Caesar salad, berries and cream for you guys. We've had some excellent meeting sponsors who will be here today. A couple of them will be here today. Railroad Commissioner Kristen Craddock, we thank her for her sponsorship. State Representative Todd Hunter with his generous contribution as well to help sponsor. And then CLEAT, the Combined Law Enforcement Association of Texas, who generously helped sponsor us as well. With that, these things do cost money. Typically at most of our SREC meetings, just to give you an idea, in order to help offset costs, the meal you're having today costs us about $30 a person, because that's how expensive it is, unfortunately, when you do events like this. Because of our sponsorships, we've been able to offset most of those costs. We do, however, when you guys return, we're going to be setting these out during lunchtime. We have our Grassroots Club cards. If you guys are not already a member of the Grassroots Club, if you want to fill that out, leave it with us. It does require credit card information on it. They cannot take cash or checks. That's the monthly donation to the state party. It's our monthly contributors. You can choose yearly, I believe, instead of monthly. That helps keep the continuing, the sustaining membership of the party to help us grow the party and continue on. So if you've not already signed up for that, fill that out if you'd like to. We'd certainly appreciate it. If you're already signed up or you don't want to sign up for Grassroots Club, if you want to leave us a check for cash to donation to help offset the cost. So just fill out your name, your address, and the occupation or employer on the card, and leave us cash or a check or whatever. And we'll also have envelopes on the table so you can put it inside that. And if you'll drop it off at the registration table outside, we'd certainly appreciate it with our staff members or volunteers out there. Again, I want to say thank you to each and every one of you as county chairs for all that you do for us. I want to also thank the incredible staff that we have and volunteers that we have, the state chairman as well, for everything that he's done. Marion Stanko, who made sure that those slides stayed on track for us over there today with us. Most of our staff isn't here, but we have a few of them. Sam Cole, our new communications coordinator, and Chris Howe, our parliamentarian, are here in the room with us. I've seen Kyle Watley, our executive director, in and out of the room today. Most of you probably, when you came in and registered this morning, you probably met my good friend Jennifer Hall. She's a former chair out of Tarrant County that I served under as vice chair there. So I want to say thank you to all of them and to a lot of other people that have helped throughout the entire time. I've been here a little more than a year. Had a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to continue helping you guys. Y'all give me feedback. What can I improve? What can I help you with more? Always feel free to just be frank with me and let me know how I can improve and help you more. With that, I will take about 5 or 10 minutes for questions.
You did not talk about state inspectors or election boards.
Okay, so state inspectors. Glad you brought that one up. With the state inspectors from the Secretary of State's office, you never know when they're going to show up.
You can request them.
Right, that's where I was headed for next. So you never know when they're going to show up. They might show up at your Republican precinct. Don't get nervous about it because you've trained your judges well. You've trained your clerks well. They know the law. They're following the law. They're doing what they need to be doing. So don't get nervous about that. As Kathy pointed out, that's another tool that you can use. You can, if I remember correctly. Other than that, it's the county judge, the county clerk, and both party chairs. One of them handles the hiring, the election administrator, that type of stuff. The other one leads and sets some of the recommendations at the manager with
early voting hours and
okay. So early voting hours. Do it.
how many polling places?
Right. So yes. So the number of polling locations, where they're at, central county station, etc. You as the county chair are a member of that. And so thank you. I will try to remember to go back and add up some of these slides for future trainings and for putting online. Yes.
Do we need to add the duties of the standing committees to our bylaws?
Yeah, so if you have standing committees are ones that you define in your bylaws. You can have